Apologies for being a couple of minutes late. I have managed to uh, block myself from exam number one content on the Blackboard. So I will talk about it very briefly and then we will go over it on Wednesday. If you have any questions at all about your grades, we can talk about there or any specific questions. We can go over them. Let's see. Share Chrome and also share PyCharm. There we go. Let's go back to Chrome. Okay. By and large, midterm one, I was very pleased. 75 points. So an A is 67 and a half or better. A B is 60 or better. Below a B, below 60, you are below a B. Probably you consider yourself having C's if you're below 60. The class was pretty closely split between A's and B's. There were only 2 grades below 60, so I was very pleased with you with your scores. There was no perfect score. 72 out of 75 was the highest. There were a couple of questions on the multiple choice true false that I probably could have worded better, but there was nothing that everybody missed, or there was nothing that almost everybody missed. So I didn't throw out any questions. So the grades, I think, will stay as they are. You should all have access to your graded tests. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, and we will go over it on Wednesday. I planned to go over it today, but as I said, I was just a couple of minutes late because I was rooting around on Blackboard trying to find the content of the test and managed to at least tentatively, at least temporarily knock myself out of it. So we'll get back to it on Wednesday and talk about it. If anybody has any specific questions now, I'll give you a chance. Feel free to ask and I can talk about them. Otherwise, I'll just move ahead with today's lecture. Okay. Again, I'll be happy to go over everything and apologize for managing. I hate Blackboard and I really ought to learn to do it better. Today, we are going to talk about functions. I'm going to jump right to PyCharm and give you an example. Now, when we write a program, the ones we've been writing so far are pretty much straightforward. They only do a single thing. That's not practical. And so what happens is we write a program. It can only be done, it can only be used for very simple tasks. Okay, so what we do is we break a program into pieces. Now, every program, every Python program in another language that works similarly, every Python program has to have a main program. Now, I'll copy this here. It wouldn't work by itself, but this is just to show you. This is what is called a main program in Python. Okay, I missed the I, so it needs to go there. I haven't really covered, but you've been learning in your labs to use a construct called if underscore underscore name underscore underscore equals, and then in quotes, underscore underscore main underscore underscore. This in Python is how we identify the main program. Now, you can have a main program with no functions, no imported code, no libraries. That's perfectly legal. There's no problem. So that's why in labs, we've been teaching you how to do it this way. Starting today, we'll be adding functions to pretty much every program you write, all of your big projects and everything here. This tells Python everything below this line is going to be the main program. And typically, we don't have to, but typically above this line in your program will be the functions that you're adding, that you're defining to help do tasks. Um, this particular construct, underscore, underscore, name, underscore, underscore, this is a system variable. Now remember, variables in Python can begin with uppercase letters, lowercase letters, or the underscore. Can't begin with digits, can't begin with other special cases. But underscores are valid names, variable names in Python. So this is a variable. And it is, when we say a system variable, it means Python has defined for its own use. So Python has defined a variable for its own use that it's going to call, that's going to use to hold the name of what you're doing right now. It is done with the underscores to make it unlikely that you will accidentally overdefine it. If you tried to use this same thing as a variable name in your program for whatever reason, you would cause problems because it would conflict with this predefined system variable name. So Python wants to choose a name that's very bizarre and that is not something you are likely to choose for a variable name by yourself at random. You're just not likely to pick underscore underscore name underscore underscore as a variable name in your code. You could, but it's unlikely. So that's why Python uses this one. The double underscores on each side is picked by Python to say this is a system variable, and it's done that way so you are unlikely to pick the same name by chance and thus cause a problem with your program, be an issue. The specific value, it's a string variable, okay? It's inside quotes, so it's a string variable, and the specific value it gets is this string underscore underscore main underscore underscore. Again, Python picked a string value that you are extremely unlikely to have used by yourself in your own code, just as a coincidence, which might cause problems. So this is simply Python saying, I've picked the variable name for the system. It's unlikely something you'll choose. And I've assigned it this string, which is also unlikely to be something you use. So this says, if this variable name is this string, do this. If this variable name is not this string, then this is potentially a function, and interesting things can happen depending on what you choose. Now, in this case, I've written a main program. It says, I'm going to print out a message. I'm going to divide 100 by an integer between 1 and 10 inclusive. Value equals int, input, please enter. So I'm going to tell the user. Now, I have something here that's undefined. Print error message value. Otherwise, do something. I'm checking to see if your value is set. If the value you've entered is an integer between 1 and 10 inclusive, and if it's not, I'm doing something funky. I'm printing an error message. So let's see what happens. I'm missing, by the way, also a closing parentheses. There we go. When I run this, okay, it looks like it runs. Ah, I'm cheating. Pardon me. I'm going to have a new console. Sorry. It is supposed to produce an error message. And it wasn't going to because I had been running it and debugging it. And so I already actually had all the code loaded, and it wasn't going to give me an error message. So let me fix that so that it breaks. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. This is where it breaks. Okay. What happens is Python says you entered 0. 0 says invoke something that's called print error message. Print error message is not defined. So I don't know this. Okay. So a main program has a call to a function. It's you run it without the function. It's not defined. So let's fix that. Up here, I have defined a function. And we'll go through the slides and explain each of these terms with a couple of other examples in a second. But this is a function Learning by doing. Reserved word. Not a word, but a term. Def. DEF. Def, short for define. This means I am defining a function. A function is going to be spelled out starting with this word. The name of the function. The name of the function is print error message. This is whatever value is passed into the function. In this case, this is called a parameter. We'll go over the slides in a minute. Called code. I'm going to pass in one value to this function through this variable code. Now, just like with the for, just like the while, just like the if, now I have a colon. Then I have a bunch of code. I have a bunch of Python code. It's an if, elif, else. If this value that's passed in is 0, print you can't divide by 0. If it's less than 1 or if it's greater than 10, print out only integers between 1 and 10 are valid. Otherwise, print out that's some other error and then return. Okay. A function by itself does nothing. Difference between a main program and a function. The function by itself does nothing. But now I have it into the console. Python now knows what this code is. So now I can put the main program in. And now this code will actually run. Okay, so let's go back to the slides and illustrate what I've just done. In math, a function is a unique mapping between each input and output. If you remember your mathematics definitions, a function is something that for an input has an output. Not every input has a different output. You can get the same output for multiple inputs, but every time you put in a specific input to a function, you get a single unique response back. X squared plus 2x plus 1 for any value of x is always going to give you a single value, which you don't do anything else. So f of x here is a function of x. For any given input, it returns a value. In Python, it's kind of the same idea. A function is a block of code called by its name that optionally gives you a specific output. Sorry, jumped ahead. Okay, trying to clear my screen so I can see what I'm doing. It takes an input and returns an output. Okay, so a function in Python is a block of code. You call it by its name. It takes an input and returns an output. Okay, or does something. Syntactically, we showed this on in PyCharm. Okay, here's a different one. The word def means you're defining a function. Okay, so going back to the PyCharm example, def, as I said, defined a function. Okay, the name of the function here, that was print error message. Okay, in Python, you can only pass, we're going to teach this on Wednesday, I'll go through all the details, but in Python, you can only pass values to a function by using this set of variables right here that are called parameters. The word parameter is right here. This is something that you call a function that is passed to the function when it's called. You have a block of code down here. And I said Python definition of function is kind of optional. You can have a return statement. A function can return a specific value. A function can choose to return no value. So let's go back to PyCharm. Okay. In our function, the word def, just like on the slide. Different function, but a name right here. Print error messages. Calculate days on the slide. It's print error message here. Parameters. So def, function name, parameter, colon. Block of code. It does something. In this function, unlike the one on the slide, I return nothing. Or specifically, I return a special value in Python, a reserved word called none. We'll get to that. In this case, this returns nothing. In the slide, my function calculate days returned a specific value. And we'll go through this. Okay. So the parts of a function when you define it: def, a name, a list of parameters that are values passed in, a block of code that does something. I mean, functions are uninteresting if they don't do anything, and optionally a return value. Now, style-wise and how Python works. In Python, you can return multiple values. Okay, you can return multiple values in Python. In 201, you should not. In the assignments we'll give you and the things that we'll teach, you will only return one value in a Python function. If you think you need to return multiple values, maybe you should be returning a list. Returning a list is considered returning a single value. That is a useful technique, and you can do that. In Python, if you have a function that tries to return multiple values, it will work, but we will knock points off your grade in 201 for doing it because it's a bad habit to get into. Why is it a bad habit to get into? Because it's really, really easy to make mistakes and it's hard to debug. And so we want you to get in the habit of doing things that are easy to understand, that are resistant to mistakes, and that are easy to debug if you do make a mistake, or should I say when you make a mistake. So we will always give you things that return one value. Python will let you return multiple values. Don't do it. You can, however, return a list. Returning a list is fine. Good programming practice. We'll do it a lot, depending on what's going on. So in the main program, you call a function. Calling a function is just down here. This code just assigns values that gets things. Okay. To call a function from your main program, calculate days, pass it the values you need, and then optionally do something with the value that's returned. Okay, let's walk through this example. And I'm going to switch in Python and PyCharm to go through this example. Terminology in the yellow blocks. In the main program, when you're calling a function, the list of values you pass it are called arguments. Arguments are going to be matched with parameters in order. Okay, so call the function, pass it values, and then optionally do something with the result. I want to copy this. So we're going to switch examples in PyCharm to go to this one. We'll get back to that other example earlier. Okay, so I've got a function that we've defined here. I don't need that. Let's make some more room. We've got a function that we define here. It calculates. Now, what do I need to do? Okay. Let me fix this. I know exactly what's wrong with this. what happens is when you copy certain things in from Google Slides, it starts replacing tabs with spaces, and PyCharm doesn't like the fact that you've got spaces and tabs mixed, and so it gives you error messages, so we'll short circuit that. Okay, now that's my function. To put my main program, I'm going to write this. Okay, so this means it's the beginning of the main program. Now, this is Python 3.8. If you're using previous versions of Python, you could get away with this. Okay, so you will see people writing programs like this. Define main. Essentially, main is defined as a regular function. It's not separated by some special command. If you see this, don't worry about it. It's an old style of Python. Depending on what version of Python you're using, it may or may not work. But don't use it with Python 3.8. I mean, the if name is main is the current thing. This is the new and updated things that all the cool kids are using. So use this to define your main program. If somebody shows you this and says that's how they learned to program Python, yeah, they learned on an older version of Python. That syntax has been changed. Okay, that's a diversion. Now, since we're in an if statement in the main program, remember, we've got to indent. Okay, so everything has to be indented, 1 tab space or 4 spaces. Now we have the main program. Okay, I want to figure out how many years, months, and days somebody is old, and I'm going to convert it to the number of days. So here's my pseudocode. Convert it to days by calling the function calculate days. This is what I'm going to do. Okay. So rather than asking the user for input, I'm just going to say somebody is 23 years, 11 months, and what's today? 15 days old. There might be one of my family members that age. So we're just going to assume that's a thing. Now, I can call calculate days. I need to match up. If I look in the definition down here, I have 3 parameters, years, months, and days. So I need 3 arguments, okay, to match it up. Years, months, and days. So let me copy this code down. Bring it down to here. Okay, cool. Nothing happened. Well, actually, yes, it did. But I didn't print the result anywhere. Okay, I didn't print out the result. Furthermore, the function returned a value, but I didn't do anything with it. Okay, I didn't do anything with it. So what I need to do now is if a function returns a value and I want to use it, I have to do something with it. I have to save it in a value. So I don't remember exactly what I called it on the slide. Apologies if this is a little different, but I'm just going to assign this to a variable name called age in days. Okay. And now I'm going to print your age is age in days. This is done so that I can take this value and do something with it. You're going to have to take my word for it. You can check it out. The way that the code actually ran before, this was calculated. The function was called, the number was calculated, a value was returned, but I didn't do anything with it. So now I've got to save it in this variable to do something with it. And now in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print it out. Okay, so I'll go back and get all my code and not miss anything. And I'll come down here into my console and I'll run it. And you see that 23 years, 11 months, and 15 days is 8,741 days, which is actually almost true. I cheated again and decided that every month was 30 days. I could put in a little table, but that seemed like not worth the effort. But this is a case of the main program called the function, got the value for it, and printed out the result. So, defined a function, passed in value the parameter, just assumed every year is 365 days. That's reasonable because I added one leap day. Now, I didn't add one leap day for every 4 years. I added one leap day. That's fine. I'll show you how to fix that in a minute. I just assumed every month was 30 days long, which is not quite accurate because I'm missing the 31 and the 28 days. But again, to change this mathematical formula is trivial. It's not the point. The point is to show how to use the function. Okay. Return num days. Okay, what do I want to illustrate first? Let me go back to the slide and see what I talked about first so I can do this in the right order. Okay, I called it. I didn't. Let's go back to PyCharm. I was supposed to explain it as I walked through in PyCharm when I wrote the slides. Okay. Points to ponder, things to learn about functions. This return quantity will be passed associated with the value of the function name. Now, do not think that that the function name is a variable. It's not. Okay, the function name is not a variable. When I say this return value is passed, it means when the function ends, this is the value that's going to come back. Okay, if in the other case I didn't have a return value, I returned nothing. I'll talk about that in a second. This is going to be passed. It is not equal to this. This is not a variable name with this value. That doesn't work. There are other languages where that happens. This it does not. You can see that as far as Python is concerned, this is a function. It's stored at some location in memory, and that's what Python is going to tell me. That's the first thing. The second thing, and this is in the slides, I'll get to it. Arguments are matched with parameter in order. Down here, argument. I kind of did the sensible thing and said years, months, and days. Okay. This is matched with the first parameter. The second argument is matched with the second parameter. And the third argument is matched with the third parameter. I'm going to change this. Okay. Python is not going to match months to months, years to years, days to days. Python is going to match the first to the first. And so when the function is called, years is going to have the value of months in the main program, MOS, which is 11. So years is going to be 11. This is 23. So months in the function is going to have the value of 23. Days is going to be days. This is going to have this match. This is going to be 15. Okay. So what I'm trying to illustrate is Python is matching in order, not by name. So let me come down here and run it. And now you notice that when I did it in this order, this person's age suddenly went down a lot. Why? Because this one, 11 plus 30 times 23 plus 15, and then plus 1 for leap day. This is the calculation that was done this time. This is the calculation. This is how my program got to this result. Because it took the first value, which was 11 months, it took the second value, which was 23 years, and it took the third value, which was 15, and that's what got assigned here. Python matches in order. The first thing passed in goes into years. In this case, 11. 11 is the value of years. The second thing get passed in to months, that was 23. The third is days. Let's come in here to this function and illustrate it. I apologize for beating a dead horse, but I'm going to do that. Years is years. Months is months. And days is days. Don't need that. Let's run the program again just to illustrate that. Okay. Here, you'll notice in the original, I passed in years, months, days. And my function thinks that years is 23, months is 11, and days is 15. Now I'm going to run the same code, except I'm going to pass in months, and then years, and then days. And now when I run that, you can see that years is 11, months is 23, and days is 15. Okay. Whole point is to illustrate that Python matches argument to parameter in the order in which you list them. Now, I've just shown you variables. Can you also pass literals? Can you pass literals in a function call? And the answer is certainly you can. I could just ignore these statements altogether and say, calculate days, 35 years, no months, no days. That's how old the President of the United States has to be. Okay. I can pass in literals. I can pass in variables. Either one works. So arguments typically are going to be variables. They can be constants. They can be literals. It will work. So point on this slide, this is how you define a function. Point on this slide, this is how you call a function. In this particular case, I used variables, which I assigned up here. I could have gotten it from the user of the keyboard. I could have used the literals here, 23.3 and 22, whatever, with appropriate arguments. This yellow box is to say match up in order. Okay. Beating a dead horse, I know, but my point is this. You're going to have errors when you write programs with functions that are going to occur because you thought that they matched up, that Python matched up the argument with the parameter by name when the name was identical, and it doesn't. So get used to it. I do it all the time. I do it all the time. Not surprising, not a big deal. Why do we use functions? You use a function, well, to make your program simple to understand, simple to debug, and modular. Okay, nice buzzwords. You use a function whenever your program is going to do the same thing multiple times, not in a loop, but in different parts of the program. Okay. Once you write it as a function, it can be called from anywhere in your program. You can have things called from other places. And so if you're going to do the same thing multiple times, why write the code multiple times? Write a function, call the function, only write the code once. If you're going to do it multiple times, make it a function. Now, obviously, in the simple exercises we're going to give you in labs and projects, you'll write functions that maybe in a real life program you won't write because we want you to practice writing functions. Always, always, always. If you're going to do the same thing multiple times in a program in multiple places in the program, always, always use a function. Make it easier. Again, because you could rewrite the code each time. Speaking from personal experience, just last week, if you do the same thing in 3 different places, you're going to do it different. And then the person reviewing your code is going to ask you why you did the error handling 3 different ways. And then you're going to have to explain to your code reviewers that you did the error handling 3 different ways because you just didn't think about doing it as a function. And she's going to explain to you that it would have been much better had you done it as a function, and you're going to fix it. Not that that's happened to anybody sitting in my office right now last week. You could copy and paste the same code, but what if there's a bug and you're copying and pasting a bug? You know, so the point is you don't want to write the code multiple times because you're going to do it differently. You can avoid doing it differently by copying and pasting, but you don't want to copy and paste because you're copying and pasting a bug. Write it as a function. Simplifies the program. We have used the term in Python so far this semester, methods. Okay. Calculate days, which is on the previous slide, is a function. String.split is a method. What's the difference? You'll get into this in higher level classes, but it's a technical term. A method is tied to one object and one object only. String.split applies to one string, the string that you name right here. Okay. Calculate days took in 3 parameters: years, months, and days. 3, not 1. String.split, you can only split one string. A method, technical definition, is tied to one object and one object only, and we say that's the object on which the method is invoked. So if you're doing it to one thing, you can write it as a method. We're not going to do that in 201, but you can write it as a method. If you're doing it to multiple things, if you don't want it tied to one object, write it as a function. A function is not tied to anything. It operates on whatever you pass as parameters. Okay. Whatever you pass as parameters, the function operates on. It's not tied to that one object. Okay. And we're going to get into this. We've got lots and lots of lectures on functions, lots and lots of things to do. You've already dealt with Python functions built in. Okay. Print is a Python function. It's not a method, it's a function. It is built, when we say it's built in, that means it's predefined by Python. You don't have to write the print function yourself. It's predefined. You call it. You call it with a list of arguments. In this case, I call print with the one argument, the string literal hello world. When I have a longer example, like in calculate days, Go back to that. Oh, I don't have it here. Sorry, on the slides. Um, but in the example where we have print string, comma, variable, comma, string, comma, variable, etc., that is calling the function with a list of arguments. In this case, I only have one argument. I can call it with a list. Print is a built-in function. Okay, you call it with its arguments. Length. Length is also a function. Okay, it's predefined. It returns the number of elements in a list or the number of characters in a string or whatever. Length is a built-in function. This is its argument, the list or the string or whatever. Okay, and it's going to return a value. Now notice, print does not return a value. Print does not return a value. Length returns a value. Its value is the number of elements in the list. Okay, so for a function, returns are optional. Even the built-in functions, print doesn't return anything. Length returns a value. In this case, it returns specifically an integer value that says how many elements in the list or the string. Okay, so Python provides built-in functions, and then you add what you write are called user-defined functions. Calculate days is a user-defined function. Okay, the print error message, which we started with, we're going to get back to, is a user-defined function. Okay, where can you put functions in your program? Usually above the main program. When you are writing code in Comp Sci 201, you will start in your programming assignments, in your homeworks and whatever, with your header comment. You always start with your header comment in this class. If you're writing code professionally, if you're doing something for a major assignment, you start with a comment that says, this is what my program is going to do. It's who I am, what day it is, and what my program is. Okay? Then you define your constants. This is what we teach you in 201. After your header comment, define your constants. Why? Because constants can be used anywhere in the program, and we're going to define them. Now, after your constants, after your header comments, after your constants, now define your functions. Put calculate days above your main program. Okay. Then your main program. Now, I will tell you right now that you do not, according to Python, have to do it this way, and we will allow you in 201 to not do it this way. But it's a good habit to get into. This is the best style. You can define your functions before your constants. Python thinks that's okay. You can actually define functions in your main program. Python thinks that's okay. We'll talk about on Wednesday what the implication of that is. Yeah, you might want to do it sometimes, but generally no. Okay. You can actually define functions inside of other functions. We discourage that in 201. It's legal. What we like to see in 201, header comments, constants, functions, main program. Make your program look like this, and you will be great in 201. Where do you call them? This answer looks bizarre, but I'll explain it in a minute. Anywhere other than on the left-hand side of an equal sign. I don't know if I'll be foolish enough to do it this semester, but the last 2 semesters when I taught this class, exam number 2 had a question, a multiple choice. Where can you call functions from? Where can you invoke functions from? The answer to that question is anywhere other than the left-hand side of an equal sign. Now, equal sign means assignment statement. Left-hand side means the value getting the assignment. You cannot put a function, you cannot assign a value to a function with an equal sign. Anywhere else, you can call functions. Can a function be called from the main program? Yes, we've seen an example of that with calculate days. You're calling a function from the main program. Can a function call another function? Yes, it can. And we'll be writing in our main programming assignments over the next couple of weeks examples of that where one function calls another function to do something. That's perfectly legit. Can a function call itself? Yes, that's called recursion, and it comes up in the last couple of weeks of the class. For now, yes, a function can call itself. We'll talk about the details very late on because we got a lot of stuff to cover before then. Can a function call the main program? No. Nobody can call the main program because the main program, unlike when it was def main, the main program's not a function. The main program executes when the program runs. It cannot be called. Okay, so a function cannot call the main program. The main program can call the function. A function can call another function. A function can even call itself. Skipping ahead. Does a function, let me add another slide because this is important. Does a function have to be defined before it can be called? Okay. Will Python say, I don't know this name, stop? The answer to that question is a great big no. You can call a function before it's defined. Python can handle this. If Python sees something that looks like a function name, like a function call, it will simply wait for that function to be defined. Now, your program won't execute. Okay, your program won't execute, but necessarily, if you're doing it in the console, your program may not execute fully, but it won't crash. However, if you're running a whole program like on GL, when you say Python 3 homework 6.py or something like that, it doesn't matter what order you define functions. You can have functions defined in the top of the program. You can have them defined later. It will all work. So there'll be more explanation of this forthcoming. But in answer to a question, if you've programmed in other languages, you've seen a lot. Does a function have to be defined before it can be called? In terms of writing the code, no. What that means, you're allowed to list functions later on. Python can handle it. All right. Matching arguments and parameters. This is another example. I showed this already with calculate days. Do it again with this one. Throw this code into the, fix my quotes. Okay. That needs to be indented, is causing that problem. And let's see. All righty. So a fairly straightforward subtraction routine. Oh, it's probably going to throw a fit about spaces. Okay, that should have fixed all my syntax errors. Fairly simple routine. Subtract. Put in two numbers, x and y. Subtract the second one from the first one. Okay. So y is 4, x is 3, and this says subtract the second one from the first one, first minus second, and that gives you 4 minus 3 equals 1. Again, illustrating, excuse me, even though I have y here and y here. I have x here and x here. Python did not match the names. It matched order. This y, this x, that y, because it matched on order. Now, the other thing I point out is you do have to actually match arguments and parameters. They have to be the same name and the same type. Suppose I left this out and then just said subtract y. What's going to happen is that I get an error. This error message is it's missing one required positional argument. The specific thing that Python did is it went up here and it said, okay, I'm calling subtract with one argument. I've got one parameter. Okay, x is going to get whatever this is. Oops, I don't have a value for y. So it was this y right here that triggered this error message. This is Python saying, I do not have a value for y, and I have to have one. So this is an error. You can't do it. Now, if I then said x, y, of course, this fixes the problem. And now I actually get 3 minus 4 is negative 1 because I changed the order of how things work. Okay, so you have to match by type. Let me get into this, see if I have a slide on that. Okay, matching arguments and parameters. This is just another illustration of the same thing. What happens if they don't match up? This is what I just did. The answer is you get an error message, okay, because they have to match up. Now, I do want to go in and go back to this original example that I had up here in the code, which is print error message. This is a case where you have something that might be reused. Okay, this is a simple example where I asking the user for input, and if the user gives me the wrong input, I'm going to print an error message. So I'm asking the user for an integer between 1 and 10 inclusive, and I'm going to check if it's greater than or equal to 1 and it's less than or equal to 10. Then I'm going to do what I want to do. If it's not there, if the value is not in 1 to 10 inclusive, I'm going to print error message. Now, what happens is that you can have lots and lots of code in your program, and you will have several different opportunities to print an error message, and you can simply pass in a code. And so what would happen is we would write a generic error handling routine that says if the code is 0, specifically if the user types in, if user says my integer 0, I'm going to divide by this, you can't divide by 0. Otherwise, I'm going to give an error message depending on what it is. And I'm going to have another case where I'm going to print out some other error. So let me copy the whole program since I've been messing around with other things. Let me copy the whole program down here and run it again. And hopefully I've fixed all the errors that have occurred. All right, here we go. So it actually runs main program. This program divides 100 by an integer of your choice. Please enter an integer between 1 and 10 inclusive. 0. This program you cannot divide by 0. Because what happens is I got to this if statement. Value is not greater than or equal to 1. Value is less than or equal to 10, but it's not greater than or equal to 1. So this and is false. So the not false is true. So therefore I executed this loop. Okay. I executed print error message value, which I passed in 0. Going up to the function. Here's my function, print error message. The parameter is code. Code gets the value 0. If code equals 0, print, you cannot divide by 0, and we're done. Okay, running it again. Now I'll enter -3. -3 is not 0, but I get the error message. Only integers between 1 and 10 are valid. Okay, and the same thing would happen. Now, this is a case where I've written a function, and the function is going to be generically useful because I'm going to have other places where errors can occur, and I'm going to pass in an error code in each time. This is if you go to various websites, you might get an error message, 404, site not found, 401, temporarily unavailable. This is basically somebody's written a function that prints out error message based on a code, and they have a table, and they say, if your code is this, print this, and if your code is that. The return just means I'm done. So that is the first part of functions. And I'm actually, looks like I've got 15 minutes left, which I had planned to spend going over the test. So I think that for today, we are done. We're going to go ahead and stop here. You've got 15 minutes free in your day. Wednesday, I will have figured out what I did wrong to Blackboard to lose the contents of the test, and I will go over them. If you want to stay on and ask any questions about the test, I'll be happy to answer them right now. Otherwise, I will talk to you Wednesday.